All right, excellent afternoon to all those who are watching us across the states in Nigeria. Gosh, the topic today is a bit overwhelming. I think myself and my guests, my co-hosts right now are a little bit down emotionally, but however, we must continue to lend our voice. And I believe that the obligation of security and the protection of life and properties of the people remains the priority of the government. And I must ask, where are the government in terms of the cases to carry out the fundamental obligation? There may be no need for it to remain in authority if all of this continues to linger on. Again, I say welcome to another interesting episode of Real Talk with Kike. I remain your convener, Kike Atanda-Owo. Of course, I have my co-host in the building, Asos Band. We are both holding it down today because Atanda is on the building today. How are you doing, Marshall?
I'm okay. Grappling with the bad news here and there and all of that. But then, of course, bad news. When we talk about bad news, what other bad news would you think that we're talking about than that from the stable of the Nigerian government? That's what we'll talk about. Not that so much is happening to us negatively. My name is Marshall Anthony Onoye. Just in case you're wondering, or if you haven't heard it from the host already, this is the Real Talk with Kike show. It's the show where we bring you things happening around and about you, and we bring it in a gist format. Welcome.
All right, many thanks for that. I think it's important for us to hear what our On This Day segment has to remind us. I know that the West African Examination Council are yet threatening to withhold the result of thousands of students from 19 states on this day in history. I think exactly 7 years ago, to be precise. Guys, let's get more of this history on our This Day in History segment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
On this day in 2015, the West African Examinations Council, WAEC, threatened to withhold the results of thousands of students from 19 states who participated in the May-June 2015 WASSCE over non-payment of candidates' registration fees by their state governments. Charles Eguridu, head of WAEC National Office in Lagos, said the governments of the respective states were owing the council a cumulative of 4 billion naira examination registration fees as at then.
All right, many thanks for staying with us. Gosh, Marshall, let me come to you quickly. What's your take on this day in history segment?
You know, when I saw that, I was wondering why the governments, the state governments will be owing that much. You know, some time ago, I also saw how much... 4 billion, over 4 billion. I mean, that was just too much. That shows the lack of priority, the lack of concentration, the lack of priority, you know, on education. Not just, you know, we'll only see federal government's budget, and then we say the federal government is not keen about the education of the nation. But when you now look at other states that are pointing finger at the federal as well, owing such an amount for why, I mean, Kike, it's a retrogressive movement all the time.
So, you know, listening to you, this happened exactly 7 years ago. The question I'm asking, is the educational sector better today after 7 years? The answer is no. Are they still owing the educational sector? The answer is yes. There are a lot of teachers or lecturers that are yet unpaid. Look at what is happening with ASU strike. Look at how the students are still at, or the pupils that are home. And the fact that, you know, this affected about 19 states, you know, it boils down to, again, when you look at the educational sector, when it comes to budgeting, you realize that the educational sector has got just the minimal allocation, and it shows how the government, you know, actually prioritize the educational system in this country. And it's just, you know, I can keep going on and on and on, but the question is, even when this money goes to this educational sector with all these states, what are they using the money for? We have seen on this show how quite a number of schools do not even have a blackboard or a seat to sit in their classrooms.
Not to talk about an internet-enabled device.
Exactly. So it's just unfortunate that, you know, history has come to remind us again on this day in history segment, especially today is about the educational sector. I'm hoping that they are listening. I'm hoping that right now with the with what is going on in our country right now, things will be better in terms of the educational sector, and our government will be able to prioritize what is needful for us. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Many thanks for staying with us. Exactly, I think over 80 senators across political parties and of course majority of House of Representative members yesterday, agreed to impeach President Muhammadu Buhari if the growing insecurity across the nation persisted beyond 6 weeks, and being the ultimatum handed the government before the legislature shut down till September 20th to be precise. And the killings and kidnappings have become the norm in many parts of Nigeria under President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. And after the walkout, the aggrieved lawmakers, told journalists that they had agreed with their colleagues from the ruling party, that is APC, at a closed-door session that the president will be given the 6 weeks ultimatum. And on the show today, guys, we will be discussing this reaction by the Senate with the response of the presidency and how they hope to achieve a better security architecture in Nigeria. And corresponding with us on the topic today and on this interview on our lunch show topic is a stakeholder in the security framework of the country, and of course a special advisor to the president on security affairs. I think it's important for us to get a quick look at his profile. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Right, welcome to the show, Dr. Kabiru. It's an honor to have your personality on the show today to talk about issues that binds us together. How are you doing today, sir? Let's start from there.
Very fine. Thank you. I hope I'm able to show up your confidence and your mood before we end this conversation. Unfortunately, that's the general feeling I get. A lot of people are quite apprehensive about the security situation in the country at the moment.
Many thanks for that. Let's just dive straight to the topic at hand. At least I know that 2,968 people were killed, while about 1,484 were adopted in Nigeria from January to March 2022 to be precise. And according to data released by the Nigerian Security Tracker, that is NST, that the figures keeps rising, and the terrorists have become more audacious, for lack of a better word, right now. Do you also think that the motion of impeachment by the Senate is a welcome reaction?
So let me just lay some foundation and let's agree among ourselves before I proceed. I'm here in my capacity as the Managing Director of Beacon Consulting Limited, and I'm speaking to you in that regard. I am not speaking to you as a special advisor to the Senate President. That would require some level of protocol that I don't have at the moment. So everything I say here, it's in my personal capacity. I just want to lay that foundation. And please let me know if you are happy for me to proceed in that capacity.
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. The consultancy that I run, Beacon Consultancy, does release its report. It has a database that is better than the Nigerian security tracker that you quoted. For the simple reason that we go to the granular level, we provide development that happen at the local government level, not just at the superficial level. So to that extent, we know that as of June this year, over 6,000 Nigerians have been killed. We also know that as of June this year, over 3,000 Nigerians have been abducted. So to that extent, the security situation in the country is extremely worrisome. It's not getting better. Last year, 9,000 people were killed. Now, going by the trajectory of this year, if as of June, 6,000 people have been killed, if nothing is done to change that, it means at the end of this year, by December, about 12,000 people would die. So that would be an increase of about 30% to the deaths that occurred in 2021. Again, because it's a pre-election year, and every analyst, including myself, knows that usually in pre-election year, the events usually increase. So the likelihood of even a figure higher than 12,000 is much more higher. So to that extent, I agree that the security situation in the country is extremely worrisome. Now, would impeachment be the way to go about it, or is an impeachment a likelihood given the current circumstances in the country? In my honest opinion, I don't think so. You just mentioned in your intro that the Senate is going on recess and it would resume around September, in which period the campaigns would have started. And so I honestly don't see any credible action coming out from that, mainly because the priorities at that time for the politicians would be them to go ahead with their campaigns and all that. So, and the likelihood of them meeting the requirements for impeachment is highly unlikely. But this is just me as a private individual speaking. Again, is it in their political interest to make such a move, especially the opposition parties? Yes, I would say so. If you look at the pictures and the numbers of the senators that were represented, very few of them are actually traditional, quote unquote, members of the opposition. A significant members of the team that showed up in that press statement yesterday were former ruling party members who had just, quote unquote, decamped for personal reasons. What is the likelihood that they are committed to that statement? So that and several other factors make it look like it's very unlikely that impeachment will be practical. It is a political move, and for now, I would leave it at that. Again, I'm speaking as a private individual.
You and I seem to agree on the fact that it doesn't look like anything much will be coming out of that threat by the members of the Senate who are threatening an impeachment move, given the antics and the body language. I mean, if you want to impeach the president, why don't you just start a process right away? Why wait until you come back from recess? It then shows the lack of seriousness in, or the gravity with, or how they're handling the security matter or concern, as they have put it. Because between now and then, how many more people would have to die in the hands of the terrorists? How many more people will have to be abducted? And we also do agree that politics is just in the heralding. By September, then would have campaigns and all that. But what would you have the senators do? What would you have the national members of the National Assembly do right now to lend a voice or to emphasize that there's a need for solution in the rising spate of terrorism in the country and killings?
And thank you for this question. So to give just a little bit of background, there are three tools, as it were, available to the National Assembly. Legislation, which is where they either introduce new laws or to revise existing laws. And then the oversight function, which they carry out. And then the budgetary function, which to an extent ties in with the first rule legislation. To an extent, the budget is the law. But it starts its own separate function. So those are the three major tools that are available to any parliament in a democratic setup like Nigeria. Now, to that extent, the tools available, and I must say, looking at it superficially, both the 8th and the 9th Assembly have done a lot in terms of prioritizing security. If you look at the legislative agenda of the 8th Assembly and the 9th Assembly, security remains either number 1 or number 2. If you also look at the number of times they have either as in terms of motions or invited security agencies to come to the parliament, uncountable. I can't even keep count of the number of times that they've done that, or they have even intervened directly in matters that have to do with security. So to that extent, it will be very difficult to fault them, in terms of their prioritizing security. The area that I think requires improvement is in specifically the oversight functions of the National Assembly in this area of security, and that requires perhaps an improvement in the capacity of the legislative arm of government to carry out oversight functions. Security is technical, extremely technical. It's not everybody, frankly, that understands and that can oversight security. And if you look at the committees, especially the chairpersons of the committees that head security committees in both chambers of the parliament, I would say they require aides that understand security better and that they trust that can also advise them in the oversight function. If we look at the American system as an example, every time there is a congressional hearing that has to do with security, you see how the entire system shivers. We don't have that in Nigeria, and it's mainly because we do not use the right tools for oversight functions. So I think that is an area that requires improvement. And unfortunately, it has to do with our history. The number of years that we've remained under military rule has given us, the civilians, this idea that we can't, critically oversight security functions, especially the military. There is that, concern, that fear, if I'll call it that, by most, persons that no, this is the military.
All right, Doctor. Many thanks for your submission thus far. Listening to you, I cannot help but ask, because I know that the Senate, approved a supplementary budget for 2022 where over 900 billion naira was given as additional funding to security agencies. And I know these 36 states of the federal or federation collect a whooping sum of 375 billion annually in the name of security votes. So my question to you right now, what are these funds, that trickling down to all these states that I mentioned now? Why is it not having impact with all that is happening right now across Nigeria? And who are those, so to speak, embezzling these funds without performance? That's my painful question to you right now.
Okay, you use the word embezzling. You wouldn't use that word, but we would need to be critical about that. But yeah, you're right. If I'm right, the 2020 budget, the provision for security is about 2.4 trillion, the highest for any sector within the economy. And so yes, security has become, for lack of a better word, a cesspool for throwing funds, and unfortunately the result is not as we would want it. I don't want to lament too much, because frankly lamenting will not help us. How do we change that? Introducing M&E within the security sector, that is monitoring and evaluation. I believe that the civilian component within the security sector we can improve their capacity for monitoring and evaluation, as well as auditing functions, so that these monies that were given out to the security department, this 2.4 trillion, should be tied to specific key performance indicators, and that both the arms of government, such as the Ministry of Budget and Planning, can look at and say, okay, there are improvements. Likewise, the coordinating elements within the security subsector, about 5 of them, can look at and say, okay, there is improvement here, or there is no improvement. This particular department asked for X amount of money. The monies have been given, but unfortunately, there is no improvement. Now, the only thing that can help us do that is through M&E, monitoring and evaluation, as well as auditing functions. those key performance indicators can be tied to metrics, and you can now monitor through clear metrics that will show either improvement or the absence of improvement. Likewise, the National Assembly can play the same role through the oversight functions and the same mechanism, metrics. You've released a certain budget through allocation, or you've approved it. It's been released by the Ministry of Finance or whichever body. But what did that particular agency promise Nigerians it was going to do? So between the coordinating elements within the executive arm of government and the National Assembly, I think better monitoring and evaluation functions and auditing functions would help us reduce these wastages that we're seeing within the security sector. I hate to say, and this is well documented, if you can pick up a report that was done by CISLAC, I think it was, I can't remember the exact day I did that report, but it's a recent report. It speaks about the leakages within the security sector, particularly making reference to the security vote that is given to state governors, that is not audited in any way, and that unfortunately does not provide clarity in terms of how it's being spent. The only state that, to an extent, has created a model that we can look at and say, okay, this is how their monies are being spent. It's Lagos State, and I recommend that model across all the other 35 states and the FCT. That is the Security Trust Fund that Lagos has. No other state has. There are other states that have trust fund, but none of them is being managed with the transparency that we see in Lagos State.
Okay, Doctor, you are a risk assessment expert. I'd like for you to, bearing in mind the fact that recently we've had two bandit groups threatening some part of the north central, northwest, Kaduna, Zamfara, FCT inclusive, and Lagos State, we hear, makes the list of states or zones that are being threatened by the bandit groups. I'd like you to make an assessment of the risk therein regarding the threats, and also considering the apprehension of the people. What really is at stake? Can you give us a risk assessment regarding that threat?
Yes. So let's start with how the news emanated. Allegedly, a memo from the NCSD, Civil Defense Corps, was released. And unfortunately, that organization has become notorious for releasing of official memos. Perhaps on a light note, I've been described as the theorist, and I'm hoping that going forward, I'll get an appointment where I'll be able to put in place some of these recommendations that I'm making. One of the first things I'll do is to probably order an investigation into the document handling mechanisms within that organization. It is wrong. I stand by this, for government memos of such a confidential nature to be made public. I said earlier on that particular organization has become notorious for that. It's not the first time. You can say the first time it's a mistake, but when it continues to happen, it means there is a problem within that system. So that's the first thing I want to mention. The source of this so-called intelligence that has created apprehension is not the right means. If you want to release something to the public, make it a public statement. Don't have a confidential document released under the cover that you want the persons to be, aware that there is an impending attack. Now, having said that, if that information is correct, it's based on credible intelligence, there are ways that you can do that. You can release a public memo telling persons to take certain measures to protect themselves. And that's what I would do at the moment. Yes, people are apprehensive. We are concerned on the basis that, terror suspects were released from Kuje prison. And some of them, especially if you look at the video that emerged from Kaduna, at least one of the persons in that video is claiming to have been in Kuje, and of course is threatening that he would carry out further attacks. So people are apprehensive, rightly. But what do? Do we just lament? No, let's start protecting ourselves. Let's start implementing anti-terrorism measures around us. If you are a family member, look around yourself. What can you do to improve your security posture? If you are a church owner, a mosque, imam, a priest, whatever. What measures can you implement to improve your security? Those are the little things I think that we can do to protect ourselves at the moment. Yes, we can continue to lament, but more importantly, let's take that level of responsibility. I'm not absolving the public security departments of that responsibility, but let's move beyond the lamentation and start taking responsibility. Government departments that are failing, that are releasing memos that shouldn't be released to the public, we should also hold them accountable while we continue to interrogate the public space and ensure that there is better protection for residents of the FCT.
Fantastic, Dr. Kabiru. Talking about accountability and ownership, because that is what I can pick from your submission thus far. I would like to quote one of the special advisor to media and publicity. That's Mr. Adeshino, that said that they know in their heart of hearts that they cannot achieve what they are saying, and they are just wasting the country's time, wasting the time of the upper chambers of the National Assembly. This statement was uttered by Mr. Femi Adeshino. And from your own expert view, as a security consultant, does it mean that the administration can do nothing to the rising insecurity, or should I say that we should still expect worse? And the reason why I'm using this, the statement "expect worse" is the fact that we know that a lot of schools in Abuja, in some places, have been shut down due to the insecurity challenges we are facing. So I'm asking in pain, how safe is the FCT at the moment?
The fact that we're able to continue with our activities, the fact that people still carry on with their normal everyday activities, I would say to that extent that the FCT is relatively safe. However, there are vulnerabilities that can be exploited by any determined adversary. And we have a lot of adversaries, terrorists, bandits, political, persons who want to achieve some political objectives. All of this can use the vulnerabilities to, carry out attacks. Schools were shut down because government wanted to kind of err on the side of caution. There are consequences to that, and I do hope the government appreciates those consequences. Now, with the specific reference to the statement by Femi Adeshina, he is a media man and he's issued his statement, and I'm hoping that beyond that, various security departments would look critically at the vulnerabilities I mentioned and attempt to block them. What are some of these vulnerabilities? We have so-called ungoverned spaces that surround Abuja. It is documented that there are gunmen who have been hibernating in these ungoverned spaces. Now, I know that the security forces have carried out raids in an attempt to rid those ungoverned spaces of these, gunmen. But we need to do a little bit more than that. There is need for a coordinated effort between the FCT administration and the security forces within the FCT and the security forces in neighboring states like Niger, Kaduna, Kogi, and Nasarawa state. For the simple reason that if we don't do that, all we're doing is dislodging these gunmen. They are able to move from wherever they are in that forest all the way to as far as Sokoto or Kiri or even Niger Republic. The same forest that I referred to that leads up to Abuja, you can go through it all the way to Sokoto or to Niger. So any effort that does not block that ability for them to move, frankly, is utility. So that is one area that I would hope the security agencies will look at. When they're doing such raids, let it be a collaborative effort between all the neighboring states so that they block the ability of these guys to move. The second point I would like to is the employment of technology in security. We have a ministry that can do a lot in terms of the ability of the security departments to use technology, and that is the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy. It has platforms that in today's world, it can support a lot of our security effort. In today's world, the physical world where you and I exist is just a small component of the world where a lot of security events happen, and that is the cyberspace. A significant portion of security threats and activities occur in that cyberspace, we need the capacity to know and to respond to development within the cyberspace, and that ministry can help in that regard. And third element is intelligence. We need to enhance our capacity for gathering and disseminating, as well as using intelligence. And then lastly is the capacity and capability of our security forces. We need better suited, better trained, better equipped security forces. If we block the leakages within the security sector, all those corrupt practices that we mentioned earlier on, the monies from that can be used to equip our security forces better. One tactical unit, maybe just a battalion, believe me, if we equip that battalion and send them into the ungoverned spaces to go and tactically, with precision, take out these gunmen, I believe that in a space of a month to 2 months, that task can be achieved. But we need to sacrifice all the leakages that are currently exist within the security sector for us to achieve that.
Thanks for your submission thus far, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. We'll go on a quick break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
I used to care for the world's opinion. I used to fear their rejection. I used to beg for validation. And I used to wait to be seen. But the fire that burned in me was hotter. And the passion that lived in me had a voice of its own. So I stopped waiting and started to act. I stopped fearing and started to live. And when they thought I'd fail, I stepped into my power.
Because my time is now.
Amstel Malta, be your best.
All right, glad to know you're still with us. In case you just joined today's show, today's conversation is about the 6 weeks ultimatum given to the president by a fraction of the Senate lawmakers in Nigeria, and of course over the rising insecurity levels in the country. And discussing with us on Real Talk is this is a security expert and analyst, talking about all the different perspectives to the topic at hand. That's Dr. Kabiru Adamu. Many thanks for all you've shared thus far. But let me quickly use this opportunity to open our phone lines. Remember that you can be part of this conversation by calling the studio number 080-988-7 77400 is showing on your screen right now, and we're streaming live on Facebook and of course on YouTube page, both on Silverbird platform and on Real Talk with Kike. Again, sir, I must say that many thanks for all that you have shared regarding your analysis. But many analysts, have said that the government and security operative are not paying attention to a critical component of security, which is the intelligence aspect of it. I know that you've mentioned it in one of your submissions, but let's tailor it down to the bandits and the terrorists, even that they show that they have better intelligence on, or they know how, I don't know how to put it, especially listening to them, saying that they when and where to attack, they know when to operate. How come our security operative only respond after attack without even using the key intelligence to prevent attack? Is one of the questions I would like to ask you right now.
It goes back to the earlier discussion we had regarding monitoring and evaluation. There are 27 ministries, departments, and agencies involved in security in the country, at least. They could be more than that, depending on how you want to approach, the definition of security. Now, the situation we have in Nigeria is that there are overlapping functions among some of them. A good example is the police and the road safety in certain countries of the world is one organization that serves that role. You also have the, Department of Road Transport, the ones that wear white and black. They are also, to an extent, sometimes carrying out functions that are policing functions, but they have no relationship with the police, even though their mandate is clearly defined in the Constitution. So the point I'm trying to make is because of this, overwhelming presence of different departments, with overlapping functions, and sometimes the mandate is not delineated carefully. When issues come up, it's a little bit difficult to hold a particular department responsible. If we use the Kuje case as an example, it's a custodial center, and the responsibility for the protection of that custodial center naturally should go to the custodial center itself. But because of the nature of the inmates, both suspects and convicts, I believe that other government departments were deployed. A good example is the SSS. Another is the military, especially the Presidential Guards Brigade, since it's Abuja. Now, for that incident, and I'm hoping that the investigative committee that looked into that put that into consideration. What were the circumstances that allowed inmates, for terrorism to be kept in that particular center? How come, for instance, despite the presence of these three agencies that I mentioned, the attack was successful? What roles did each and every one of them play? What were the vulnerabilities that were exploited by the attackers? Is it the fact that inmates were allowed to use telephones? How come inmates were allowed to keep private telephones and their communication with the outside world was not guided? It's very easy for me if I'm advancing.
Are you there, doctor?
Yes, I am. Can you
apologies for interrupting your line of thought. We have a caller on the line. Many thanks for calling Achiba from Akwa Ibom. What's your contribution on the topic at hand, please?
My concern about the issue of security in Nigeria is that the government should be serious about it, because they are not serious about it. Are serious about it, they will be able to handle it, because the area that the thing is happening, even though it is grown that they will use in order to monitor those places, if they didn't have the good soldiers in place, they can have a monitoring unit that will be monitoring some areas that all these problems have been taking place. From there, they will now go direct to that place to check. Not when something happens, they will now send people to go there. Now we look at it that because it has started to affect the government, and that's why the Senate themselves are saying that the president is giving him some time to the aspect. But this is something that has been taking time for a very long time to take place. None of them shows interest about it. It is every time we here in Nigeria try to know that when you are sent to a particular place, you are in that place to work for the masses, not personal. Everybody are looking for their personal interest. That is the problem that we are having.
For your contribution on the topic at hand. All right.
All right. Doctor, I'd like to pick your thoughts on certain topics that, when we talk about terrorism and banditry in Nigeria, has really given rise to topics such as state policing and gun rights. And you also mentioned self-protection, advising Nigerians. Some clerics of the Muslim and Christian faiths have said, look, Nigerians should take up arms. Another cleric said, the jawbone of a bull, while some others say use stones and sticks. What would you say about gun rights and state policing?
Okay, so if we look at countries that have liberalized ownership of weapons, guns in particular, the statistics starts coming from those countries are not encouraging at all. In the case of the US, it has the highest rate of gun-related deaths in the world. Not even countries like Iraq or Syria, where you have a full-blown conflict. If you look at South Africa, which also has a liberal, even though not legal, but there is to a large extent a lot of weapons in circulation in the hands of civilians. Soweto, from the report I saw yesterday, every night you have 27 persons killed on the basis of gun-related violence. If you multiply that in a year, you have an idea of what figures you get. At one point, it was the crime capital of the world. Likewise, Chicago. So the two have been kind of shuffling, this on infamous title between them, and for the simple reason that people are able to access.
All right, many thanks again for that. We have a caller from Edo State, Chris. Chris, many thanks for calling. Please go straight to the topic at hand. Chris, are you there?
I'm there, thank you.
Yeah. Make your thoughts count. Apologies, I have to let Chris go. Sir, with all that you've shared thus far, I cannot help but ask why the reasons for increase in violence. When I say increase in violence, I'm talking about, the fact that, Boko Haram is already 10 years in Nigeria, with my research thus far. And I'm wondering, for how long is this going to continue? Because I feel that because there's no consequences for their actions, hence the reason why it has lasted for this long. I think that's my first question to you. Also, if you can also answer this based on your own as a special advice, as a special analyst, when it comes to security, I'm sure that you must have series of recommendations to different parastatals, in this country regarding the topic at hand. I believe that let me take that back. What are the recommendations that you have been able to give thus far to different departments, and how are they being able to implement it, or has it been implemented thus far?
Okay, let me start with why the security issues are growing. There are drivers of insecurity, and unfortunately, we're not addressing those drivers adequately. When the first caller mentioned government, the first thing that came to my mind is, who is he referring to? Government is such an off-loss word. We need to be specific when we use the word government. And if you look at the drivers of insecurity, you would realize that each level of government has a responsibility. So the same way we interrogate the federal government or the executive arm of government at the federal level, we also need to engage both the other arms of government as well as the government at other levels, the state government and frankly, almost non-existent local government. What do I mean by that? Poverty, which is one of the reasons drivers of insecurity and unemployment, is not something that can be addressed alone by the federal government. It must be a collaborative effort between the state governments and the federal government, and to an extent, the almost non-existent local government. We have to reduce or wipe away, it's not possible anyway to wipe away completely poverty, unemployment or poverty, but we have to reduce the bare minimum. Most people cannot see the correlation between poverty or unemployment and security, but there is a positive correlation. The more people are poor, the more they are susceptible to the incentivization that allows insecurity to grow. There are several other drivers of insecurity: proliferation of small arms and light weapons, the climate change, and our inability to put in place adaptive measures for climate change, the weak, almost ineffective criminal justice system that does not identify and punish offenders. It's not just the federal government thing. The state governors do have a responsibility for the prosecution of offenders based on our court systems. Again, that is a responsibility that all the levels of government would have to play. Drug addiction and the collapse of the traditional peace resolution mechanisms that we used to have at society. This is clearly a government, especially state government responsibility. If you look at Zamfara, there was a time when the traditional rulership system was influential, but because for political reasons, some governors changed certain appointments and reduced the capacity of those traditional rulers to address conflict at that local level, creating a vacuum. And it is that vacuum that has created the monster. I'm sure you watched the documentary recently by BBC on the banditry situation in Zamfara, where they identified clearly that it is a challenge between two communities, Hausas and Fulanis. Now, there was a traditional system for addressing that challenge. Political players changed that system, and we have a monster today that we're not addressing. Now, to the second part of your question, specific recommendations. Unfortunately, I can't come on air in public and start speaking about specific recommendations I have made or I haven't made. What I can tell you is that the answer to solving these problems is there. It's not rocket science. I just gave you the example of banditry, and it's been identified that this banditry is an issue between two groups. The leaderships of these groups exist. They are leaders, both from a traditional point of view, from a religious point of view, and as well as other platforms. There are leaders. The solution is to bring those leaders together and end this thing. But instead, what we see is the use of the military in an attempt to solve the challenge. That would never work. We need to look at those root causes and to address those root causes.
Fantastic. All right, many thanks, Dr. Kabiru, for all that you've shared thus far. And I must say that really appreciate you on this platform. And before we let you go, we have the last segment of the show that we call Trending Stories. These are stories that bind us together as Nigerians, that interest us as Nigerians. And the first trending story that caught our attention is that of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, that is EFCC, that says that he arrested two Herbalists who allegedly conspired to defraud an aspiring House of Representative member in Ekiti of over 24 million. Before I come to my guest to give you submission, Masha, let me come to you quickly. What's your take on this trending?
The House of Reps member that went to Herbalist. First of all, EFCC arresting Herbalist for defrauding the House of Reps member. I do not know if that is within the purview of the EFCC as their constitutional function. And then the House of Reps member that went to Herbalist and was defrauded by the Herbalist. You would want to ask, what is the legality in that? Asking a Herbalist to rig election, or through some spiritual powers to make the election go your way, or offer prayers to some gods or some oracles somewhere? Did they do those sacrifices and offer the oracle or prayers? I'm wondering how that would go and how a petition will be raised to EFCC that somebody went to a Herbalist and the Herbalist asked me to pay X amount of money. At the end of the day, the election did not go my way. Therefore, EFCC should investigate. It's a sorry case. All right.
Many thanks, Marshall, for your submission. We can say our politicians, if you ask me, in a disgraceful manner. That's the word I would like to use right now. And why on earth will you approach a herbalist because of being power hungry or power drunk? But I think it's power hungry, And well, I just feel that this is the culture and the norm of our politicians. And the reason why I'm saying that is because only that he is just one person who got unfortunately exposed. They say that the game is occultism, so to speak. We can just imagine the figure involved, 24 million naira. And, what I was trying to gather my thoughts when I saw this video, I wonder if some of these politicians are even educated. Yes, I'm asking because if you have 24 million naira, as an entrepreneur, I would think that something productive will want to come out of that money. You can simply just strategize and use that money to, impact the lives of people in your constituency, so to speak, either by sponsoring education of pupils, or buying medical supplies for the community, in terms of health centers and the like. But no, they lack simple common sense and prefer to be seeking useless powers, or from native doctors. And one can just imagine, that kind of ideology. And when they get to the position of power, I wonder what this kind of, character, so to speak, will do. So, I feel that our culture, we still believe in spirituality. So I would like to quickly address this because, to look at this from the angle of physical and social matters affecting the communities right now, I just feel that, this so-called system is a failure. And to the youth out there, because, what also came to mind, watching this video is the fact that some youth are watching this video right now and they want to emulate exactly what they have seen. I'm a believer of some of the things that is being exhibited in most of these Nollywood movies shouldn't have come into air in the first place. Because as you put the content out there, however you look at it, they are promoting it. So to the youth, and the so-called Yahoo generation who also like to patronize them and engage in rituals every now and then. You know, you should have a rethink with what you have just seen. I believe that you can also, you know, cut out all these corners, because at the end of the day, there's no corner to any success. If you ask me, you can only invest in hard work, due diligence, and consistency to get to the desired result. Because I feel that the youth of today just lack that consistency. They just want to get rich quick. And if you see our leaders, so to speak, who are supposed to be leading them, are also doing the same thing. It's just unfortunate. I don't know if I can come to my guest right now. If you can give maybe 1 minute submission before we go to the second trend. What's your take on this, sir?
Well, my kind of perspective would be to try to correlate the kind of ritual models that we see as we approach election seasons. My consultancy keeps record of that, and unfortunately the statistics are green. Basically what I'm trying to say is that there is unfortunately a correlation between the number of ritual murders and the harvest of organs that we are monitoring in the country and political seasons. So it is a security issue that, and just to address what the other anchor mentioned, any fraud can be investigated by the EFCC. I know the angle you're looking at. If someone collected 24 million and said it's going to help the person achieve an objective, and at the end of the day he didn't do that, and the person reports him, the EFCC can look into that, because of course it's fraudulent. He did not deliver what he said. But beyond that, and this is the point I'm trying to say, the security department would need to use intelligence to establish that correlation between these ritual murders. This herbalist harvest organs and use it for these purposes. So it's even more important than the fraud, than the EFCC investigation. When the people are killed and the organs are used for such practices, I think it's something that we as a country should address. We should stop being the proverbial ostrich that hides its head and leaves the body. We need to call a spade and bring this to an end.
Submission from you right there. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We might not be able to take our second trending story on Peter Obi replying article. With that, we've come to the end of another edition of Real Talk with Kike. Indeed, we had an awesome show today on this edition, courtesy our resourceful guest, Dr. Kabiru Adamu. I say many thanks to you again for honoring my invite, and I wish you the best of luck in all your endeavors. Please enjoy the rest of your day. My name remains Kike Atanda-Owo, and you are
Marshall Anthony Onoye. Thanks for watching. Achibong and Chris, who also called onto the show, want to say thank you. Join us same time next week.
All right, now. Bye now. Bye, guys.